So we're talking about God's Moedim. Leviticus 23:2 says, "Speak unto the children of Israel and say unto them concerning the feasts of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts." But these aren't just celebrations. The word Moedim is translated as appointed times. There are 7 Moedim as stated in Leviticus 23. Each one is designed by God himself for a special purpose and picture of a time that God would fulfill. Humans love to celebrate, and therefore these have become times of celebration. However, they have a much deeper meaning and actually speak of both past and future events. The 7 Moedim are Shabbat, Pesach or Passover, Hag HaBikurim, Feast of First Fruits, Shavuot, Pentecost, Rosh Hashanah, Feast of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, and Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles. We have already covered Passover in another video. So today we're going to look at Hag HaBikurim. Typically we call Feast of First Fruits Hag HaBikurim, but it does have other names. It's also called HaKatsir, Feast of the Harvest, and Yom Aseph, Day of the Ingathering. It's spoken of in Leviticus 23:10. "Speak to the children of Israel and tell them, when you have come into the land which I give to you, and shall reap its harvest, then you shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the Kohen," or the priests. Leviticus 23:13 says, "And you shall offer on that day when you wave the sheaf a male lamb of the first year without blemish as a burnt offering to the Lord." So the Feast of the First Fruits, you have to have a sheaf of the first fruits and a lamb, 1 year old, without blemish. In our modern day culture, the Jews celebrate first fruits by honoring their farmers and donating food and money to agricultural projects. But there is no longer a temple to bring their offerings to, so it is not one of the major celebrations. It is the beginning of counting the Omer through the 50 days of Shavuot, and we will go over that in the next video. Passover and first fruits have been combined by the Christian community into the celebration of Easter, which is determined by the Gregorian calendar and the spring equinox. Passover is determined by the new moon and the barley being ripe, so they often end up being on different days. So there is a controversy surrounding when the Feast of First Fruits is to be celebrated, when to start the counting of the Omer to get to Shavuot. Everyone agrees that they are the same day, but which Sabbath day? Passover is a day for no work, so it is also considered a Shabbat or a Sabbath day. Because of this controversy, it's also controversial as to when Yeshua died. So let's look at this. In Leviticus 23:7, it says, "On the first day you shall have a holy convocation." This is Passover. "You shall do no customary work on it." Now, it does not say you shall call it a Sabbath day. It's just you're not to do any customary work on it. So it's kind of called a Sabbath day because there's no work, but the scriptures do not call it a Sabbath day. In Leviticus 23:11, it says, "He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted on your behalf on the day after the Sabbath. The priest shall wave it." So this is specific to the Sabbath day. This is Feast of First Fruits. In Leviticus 23:15, it says, "You shall count for yourself from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be completed." So this is the counting of the Omer. Both of these specifically say Sabbath day. So once again, the day of Christ's crucifixion is controversial. So I'm just going to go over what I see as when the Feast of First Fruits were and during the time of Jesus. So for sure we know that Yeshua died on Passover. This was the day that says, you shall do no work. So Christ had to be buried before that evening, because the next day was a day they weren't to do any work. But it wasn't necessarily the Sabbath day or the seventh day. So if it was Saturday, Christ died on Friday and was buried before Saturday, then the very next day would have been Feast of First Fruits. Is this when Christ rose from the grave? Well, Matthew 12:40 says, for as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So there's really no way to get 3 nights into this. You could say Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe 3 days, but really just Friday night, Saturday night, it's only 2 nights. So let's go ahead and put 3 more. We're not sure exactly which day or how they were counting it, but for sure we know that Christ rose from the grave after 3 days and 3 nights. So this says in Matthew 28:1, now the Sabbath day, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. So this is, we know for sure, this is where Christ rose from the grave, was on a Sunday, which was the day after Saturday. So that would have been the Feast of First Fruits. We also know that the Feast of First Fruits was also on a Sunday, because 50 days later, since the Feast of First Fruits is counting the Omer, 50 days later, the disciples were in Jerusalem for Shavuot on Sunday. So this would have had to have been a Sunday for sure. And so the day before that would have been the 7th day or the Sabbath day. So even though the day that Yeshua died is controversial, we do know that he died, praise God. And so let's see what happened on the day that he died. Matthew 27:5 says, and when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tomb after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. Now, after Jesus rose again in the garden, the women came to Jesus and they saw him, and he says to them in John 29:17, do not touch me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God. So we know that the saints, the Old Testament saints, were resurrected, and they were in Jerusalem, and that Yeshua said to the women that he had not yet ascended to his Father. Yet a week later, it says in John 20:27, then he said to Thomas, put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. So before he ascended to his Father, they were not to touch him, because he had to go into the Holy of Holies as a pure and spotless lamb. But when he came back a week later and he saw the disciples, then the disciples were able to touch him. John 21 says, now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early while it was still dark and saw that the tomb had been taken away from the tomb. The stone had been taken away from the tomb. In John 20:17, Jesus said to her, do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God. And this is a picture of the Garden of Gethsemane in Jerusalem. So what happened? In 1 Corinthians 15:23, it says, but now Messiah has been raised from the dead. he became the first fruits of those who are asleep. So Leviticus 23:13 says, and you shall offer on that day when you wave the sheaf a male lamb of the first year without blemish as a burnt offering to the Lord. So he was the Feast of First Fruits completion because he took all of the Old Testament saints and himself to the Holy of Holies, ascended to his Father, and presented his first fruits before the Lord and himself as the burnt offering, or the male lamb of the first year without blemish. When Yeshua came forth from the grave, he was clean and without blemish. He gathered the Old Testament saints that had risen from the grave and went into the Holy of Holies in heaven to be the offering of first fruits. Newly harvested grain could not be eaten until the first fruits of grain had been offered on the day after the Sabbath of the festival of unleavened bread. So until Yeshua became the offering, there could not be another harvest, a harvest of believers in Yeshua. So this was the cutting off point, or the point in between those who would die without Yeshua and those that would die with Yeshua. So a cutoff point by the harvest, the barley harvest. So this was the completion of the Feast of First Fruits, which Jesus fulfilled. Next time, we're going to look at the counting of the Omer and Shavuot.